Creamery is a show that's been described by Sydney Morning Herald as a dystopian series that is masterful with deadpan humor and a terrific cast. Guy Somerset writes that it's possibly the best piece of New Zealand television since Flight of the Conchords. Such great plaudits, but these, and of course we agree. And recently it won Best Series in the New Zealand TV Awards. It's great to revel with such accolades. And I think it's really interesting to kind of figure out how it started, where it started, and how did we arrive here at this place. And so to do that, let's go all the way back, Ali and Bronywnn. Can you please tell us, Ali, what inspired Creamery?
So this was around 2018 when President Trump was in power, and Roseanne, JJ, Billy, and myself were just having a yarn around the table talking about, the state of the world. Who knew it would get even worse? So we were just talking about Handmaid's Tale, how we love the show, but it's very depressing to watch. So that's how we came up with Creamery, like the antithesis of the Handmaid's Tale would be like a comedy and gender flipped and power dynamic flipped, and what that thought experiment would be like. And that's how that idea was born. We didn't take it very seriously initially, but I think one way to test whether, your idea really holds is to just do the one sentence pitch to your normie friends, which is what Roseanne did. She just kind of pitched it to her or her pals, and they loved it. And we thought, this needs to be turned into a show. And that's essentially why we pursued it, because whenever we said it to someone, they responded really excitedly.
And it is quite a bold premise, and it's what some might say risky. You're talking about a flipped Handmaid's Tale. You're talking about building a world that we haven't yet seen, certainly in New Zealand screens. And it takes a little bit of courage to do that. And before that, you guys were working on FLAT3 Productions. You were working on mini web series. You were working on these kind of small comedies, but this seems a grander vision. When did you know it was time to do such a scale? What confirmed that, we're ready for this?
I think this was around the time when that comedy drama mix was really taking off in the US market, shows like Atlanta, Barry, and those were the shows we were really drawn to watching as comedies. And it's that thought, why can't we make it here? And being a small independent grassroots company, we don't have, I guess, the pressure to be a business as such, even though that's a very important part of this industry. So we thought, hey, let's just go big or go home, because we weren't going to make web series anymore. If we're going to make something, we want to make something bigger in scale. We wanted to dream bigger, and we wanted more. And I think that's quite a important lesson to anyone out there. Ask for more than you think you deserve, because often what you think you deserve is a lot less.
Excellent. That's a really, really great tip, particularly for fledgling writers, but also writers who may have found a comfortable space and just exist in that space. Maybe time to up the game. Now, you found a really great collaborator with Bronywnn here. And Bronywnn, I'm going to turn to you this time. This was not your regular proposition, this project, the scale, the scope, the angle with which they were taking it, the leads, the creative people. They clearly sought partnership with another production company to live up to the scale. Can you tell us about how the project arrived to you and what drew you to it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I first was introduced to the project. Obviously, I knew of FLAT3 and I followed their work really closely. We were making a, kind of similar type of comedy. We very much were playing in that kind of same space. And so I was always drawn to their work. And then the lovely Kathy O'Neill, he was working with Roseanne and the team on the project, and he, he's a very smart man, and was just, you know what, I think this could be a really lovely, amazing partnership. And he introduced Roseanne and I formally. We'd met at, you know, various functions and things like that, but yeah, he introduced us, and Roseanne was like, let's go have a coffee and let's just talk about it. And we spent kind of an hour and a half just chatting about the vision. She talked to me about why it was important to make the show. And for me, it was a kind of a no-brainer. It was extremely ambitious. I think all comedy is quite ambitious, because I think all comedy comes with a bit of risk. I was also looking for a project, as Ellie said, I think it was at that time where there was a shift in kind of what comedy was doing. You couldn't just be slapstick, or you couldn't just be sketch anymore. You needed to kind of have heart. It needed to be authentic. It needed to have a hook. You know, it was kind of when we were all turning to Netflix for our shows rather than local programs. So for me, it kind of had all that appeal, and the ambition is what drew me to it. It was kind of the passion. And I think, as everybody knows, we all work so hard in this industry, and you've got to be passionate, otherwise you just couldn't do it, you know. And so when I met with the team, eventually it was just it was a no-brainer for me. It was a perfect opportunity for Kevin and co to jump on board something that I really believed in, and I could see that the team really believed in, and there was a strong collaboration just from the get-go.
There's definitely a risk involved, not just in terms of a financial risk, but there's also, productions are really interesting kind of relationships. What are the things that drew you about each other as people? Because you have to get that chemistry right. And sometimes people say it looks great on paper, but you know, let's see if it works. And then, you know, like sometimes relationships have the best of intentions coming into it, and then things start to fray. But you obviously saw it through. You obviously formed a really great relationship. Can you talk about what qualities each other had, what each of your teams brought to the fore that allowed this synthesis to happen? I'll start with you, Ellie.
I think what's so great about Bronywnn is she just has such a great grasp of what we wanted to achieve, and she was completely on board from day one. And she has a great sense of story during development, and was able to really pull these people, these writers, contributors to our team, and they were phenomenal. You know, she's a chemist in a way, and that's what producers are. They assemble the team. They can know what you want before you know it, and that's, you know, Bronwynn's that person, and I really rate the work she did on this show.
Excellent. And to you, Bronywnn, like these are really creative people. What aspects really drew you to them and that allowed them to really mesh well with your team?
Yeah, I think the key thing for me as a producer is you have to, every single show you produce is different. Like the way I produce Creamery is different to the way I produce other shows that we have on our slate. And it's about identifying what the creative needs are of the project, what the, you know, the budget needs are of the project, and the commercial reality of it. And I could tell from day dot that the creative team, they were going to get this show made through hell or high water. Like it was going to happen, you know, the passion and the determination. And so it was up to me to then create that space for it to happen in a very fast way, because we don't, you know, this market, we're so small, and we often, you know, our development times are, you know, we don't have a big pool of development money. So I had to kind of keep the ship moving. And, you know, full credit to the Creamery creators, because they trusted me to power on. You know, Roseanne was in production, or she was in post-production on her feature film. She was rewriting some other things. You know, there was a whole lot going on. JJ, Perlina and Ellie were doing, Perlina was in the UK. Like it was, you know, it was, so they kind of like, they put their trust in me. And for me, that's what you need as a producer, like the famous saying, right? You, as a producer, you surround yourself with the experts and you let them do their job. And FLAT3 did that. They got me on board, and they went, okay, Bronywnn, now you need to steer the ship for us, and you need to bring in the right people. And we had constant conversations about that, and it was just an open dialogue from the get-go. And there were robust conversations, don't get me wrong, like there were extremely robust conversations, and that's part of making television. And it always just worked for us because we were able to navigate our way through it because we had the same goals at the end of the day.
Without disclosing anything like traumatic or whatever, are you happy to share some of those kind of the basis of those robust conversations, particularly moments that were challenging in terms of perhaps a difference of opinion in the vision or execution or whatever aspect you'd like to share?
I think,
Ali? Sorry.
I was gonna kick it off, Ali, and then you can jump in. I think the biggest, which I actually think is a positive, and is kind of, it's a double-edged sword, right? Because our biggest roadblock, I guess, was budget. It always came down to the ambition of the project versus the reality of the budget. And I'm a producer that, in a writer's room, in a brainstorm, in a session, in a feedback, I never want to say, we cannot do this because of budget. It's more like, I love the intent of this, but how could we, what's the version of this that doesn't involve 1,200 stuntmen and 4 car chase scenes and all that kind of, I think at some point there was a full car roll down a cliff,
I was gonna say, I mean, it's not like it looked cheap because you had a carnival with what seemed to be a cast of thousands with an action sequence happening in there. So what were those things that, a car chase and car rolling?
The Ferris wheel was surprisingly, the Ferris wheel was a big ticket item. But what we did is we constantly, and Ellie, you can probably speak to this as a creator because you were on the other side of it, it was never a no, it was always okay, what is the intent of the scene? How can we achieve it in the way that we can afford to achieve it? Or if we want to do this, what else are we going to, what is another compromise? What can we do here? So Ellie, you can probably speak to that in terms of how that felt as a creator.
Absolutely. I think, what Bronywnn said, what is the emotional intent? What is the emotional objective you're trying to achieve with the spectacle here, and how can we scale it to our budget? Another thing I would like to mention is probably the length of the development time that we touched on before. Shows, like most shows, have a very little development time, and Creamery, I think we had the luxury of developing the series for at least 1.5 years before we went into production. And that was met with, I guess, a lot of resistance because, money was running out, time was running out, deadlines were coming. And those were the robust conversations we had, who could steer the ship while Roseanne was in production for Shadow in the Clouds. And we had a script producer from Australia who was wonderful. And yeah, so the development phase, I think, you always want more time or more money. Yeah.
And absolutely, and that could be totally challenging. So you've developed this idea, and I love that you mentioned the emotional heart of the project, because despite the spectacle, despite the premise, what kept us watching and what made the show, certainly for some of us, to be completely bingeable. I'm talking about a series I did not plan on binging, but you just had to keep watching it because the heart of the narrative and the heart of the conflict was just present all the time. Can we talk a little bit about that? How would you articulate the emotional heart of this series, Ellie?
I think grief. Grief is permeates throughout the series.
Yeah.
It's expressed in 3 different ways through the main characters. Love, it's very universal things done in a very specific way, and I think that's what keeps people watching, what keeps it relatable, what keeps it addictive. Yeah.
And on that we had, we were able to use, and this was a gift of the project as a producer, because you've got three females that you can tell the story through. And they were all experiencing grief in a different way. Perlina's character, Pip, used comedy basically to deflect and organization, and she had to be on top of it. Otherwise, if she let her mind settle, she would probably explode, Ellie's character, Alex, was just really angry at the world. And JJ's character, Jamie, was just heartbroken. And we have to thank kind of Tony Ayres, Adrian and Kirsty for really kind of reminding us constantly about everything needs to come back to those three women. And we, you know, we had our sentence, and we constantly just every single, even on set, when we were doing a scene, sometimes we'd be like, what is this scene about? You know, what does it come back to? And it comes back to the friendship. Can this friendship survive this post-apocalyptic world? And that was something that, you know, the writing team was so good at. Dan Musgrove, he's so good at just kind of reminding us when he's doing his draft about what is this actually about, and so that you can then do the spectacle and the set pieces and all that. But at the end of the day, it's actually about these three women and their experiences.
That takes us nicely to the writing aspect of this. As you said, you had a long development period, and you yourselves, FLAT3, Ali, JJ, and Perlina, and Roseanne, you have your own rhythms. You have your own kind of established practice of how you generate things, and now you're bringing in collaborators who don't have your history, who don't have your shorthand. And you've mentioned some of them. All of you are nominated in the recent New Zealand TV Awards. Can you tell us how that worked, how the writer's room worked in terms of coming up with a single unified vision in the writing? I'm gonna bat over to you, Ellie.
Bronywnn can add more to this, but my perception of it is that in New Zealand, there's a lot of, you know, great, unique voices, but unlike the US, we're not, like, writers don't get paid that much, so there's not a bunch of writers who can mimic the head writer's voice, who is Roseanne. So how we solved that issue is, so each writer, Shoshana, Dan, Kirsty, they would do their draft, and then Roseanne would do her voice pass, and that's how we were able to unify the vision, unify the voice, get the comedy tone correct, or get the drama to the level that, you know, Roseanne would be excited to direct. But yeah, over to Bronywnn.
Yeah, I think we knew that, I mean, any good series needs a unified voice, right? And so we knew that that we wanted to retain FLAT3's voice. That was a really, really important part for us. We had three women, you know, who are not only the creators, but they're the leads. So they were able to track their characters beautifully through the development and the writing process. And then we had a wonderful writing team who, you know, Shosh's voice, she understands Roseanne, so does Dan. Dan's got an amazing logic brain, so he can twist and turn, and he was really good at kind of adding all the structure and adding the kind of heart and the character moments. And then basically we kind of found ourselves in this unconventional, it's not unconventional for the rest of the world, but I think it's unconventional for New Zealand. We kind of found ourselves in this situation where Kirsty and I, Kirsty is our script producer, so she was managing the writing team and running the rooms with the creators and myself there as well. And we found ourselves in a position where it was like, it's really clear to us that Roseanne needs to do a voice pass. So a director would normally always do a pass, but because Roseanne is the creator, you know, essentially the showrunner and the director, it was a bit more than a director's pass, I'd say. But that was, you know, I had to create space for that, and I had to manage the team's expectations around that. But it's what the show needed, and as soon as we were all kind of on board with that, we were able to move forward, and we basically added an extra step into writing. You know, normally you'd kind of do first draft, second draft. We did another draft, and then we had our EP's notes and, you know, the final. And we also, you know, the one thing that Roseanne really needed for this project, and I think the girls will back her up, is that she needed all 6 drafts, and it was just such a luxury as a producer, because in this market you write your one draft and then you're like off to shooting scripts, off to production, you're going, you know, you're constantly, you know, you're on set trying to finish it, whereas we had, by design, you know, she went away to a batch over Christmas and spent the time writing, and that was just, it was a lovely luxury to be able to see it all. We were still writing right up to shooting, but it just gave us the ability to track the characters, track the exposition, track the budget, all of that, which, you know, not always you get to do, because you're racing to get to the finish line.
Excellent. I'm going to go back to Ali now, and you talked, Bronywnn, about the fact that not only were Ali, JJ, and Perlina the creatives, the genesis of this project, they also are the actors. So it's not like the development is we'll write it together and then we'll go into casting. I wonder who we'll get. So can you talk, Ali, about the construction of Creamery in terms of the characters? Did those characters evolve in order to accommodate the very real strengths you guys bring as actors and as a group? Because your ensemble, as it were, has been existing for a long time. So can you tell us about the input that you had as actors to that aspect of the writing?
Yeah, I think from day one, we knew that we wanted to play characters different from our FLAT3 Friday Night Bites archetypes. And interestingly, during when we brought Kirsty on, the character that myself and JJ played, we kind of got swapped. The reason being, I think, with performance and chemistry and stuff like that, the more authentic it is, the better it comes across on screen. And Pip and Jamie are supposed to be best friends, and in real life, I would say JJ and Perlina are much closer as friends, and I think that's the reason why Roseanne decided to swap our characters around.
So how did you feel about that, though? It was like, wait, but I was all ready to be the Earth Mother.
To be honest, I'm quite thrilled playing Alex. I tap into a different side of myself when I play her, and it's exciting. And I think JJ would agree. She taps into a different side of herself when she plays Jamie, because they're not characters we typically get put up for in auditions. Mm-hmm. So it's a total luxury to have characters written for you based on your natural inclination, because the performance is just so much easier. You're not faking it most of the time.
Did you get a sense of ownership then with regard to this character wouldn't do that, or they wouldn't say this?
Oh yeah,
or,
yeah, absolutely. I'll write my little sticky notes going, I don't think I would say it like this. I constantly gave dialogue notes, which is probably like a big no to the writers.
Yeah. And did that ever reach the set, or was all of that negotiated before the camera started rolling?
Oh no, some of my suggested lines did make it to script, so I'm really thrilled.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah,
excellent. And because you were again in these kind of privileged positions, like on set, were you able to kind of change things on the fly, or was it crafted because of the lengthy development period, like 6 drafts? Did it get to the point where, what, this is the gleaming jewel that is Creamery, let's just turn it into, off the page into the thing? Or did you find yourself kind of evolving as you were shooting? Because word around the campfire is that you had some logistical challenges ahead. Did that affect any of the storytelling as you conceived it in the safety of a writer's room?
Credit to all the writers. The script was amazing. The intentions are so clear. And Roseanne is a wonderful director who lets you, we shoot the script first, but she lets you have takes that you can improv a bit more on. And that's what kind of happened on set. Like, we would shoot the script. If something's feeling a bit stiff or stale, we would improv slightly on the intentions. And I think that's why it comes, like, the comedy comes across so well, and because it's not all planned to the T. Yeah,
excellent. And there's room for spontaneity. And
yes, absolutely. Yeah,
fantastic. And Bronywnn, let's talk about the hurdles and challenges of actually getting it to camera and shooting it. I mean, obviously it's well known, it's been written about that you shot parts of this during a pandemic. And then, that classic scene, you're probably really tough logistical scene. Again, this set piece of a carnival with a menstrual cycle, a menstrual cycle wheel. Can you talk about the difficulties of pulling that together? Because there were some weather issues, I believe.
Yeah, so it was we moved our schedule. We had to move our schedule because of COVID. So that the first problem that posed is I had a baby, right? I think on day 10.
Which is poetic, really.
Yeah, and I know, and I had a baby boy. So that was, you know, that was challenging in terms of being available and being there, and you know, that kind of thing. We had me having a baby, we had COVID, and then we had the most amazing weather, except for the 4 days. Was it 4 days we ended up shooting at Syncfest? That it rained for 4 straight days, and there was nowhere to go with our schedule. So this is the thing about doing low budget. There is no such thing as wet weather option. You power through. And Roseanne and I had lots of conversations, and it was just, you know what? And in some ways, I remember talking to the edit team about it. It kind of played in our favor, because you had this start of this kind of dreary, kind of weird, kind of what is this out of this world kind of experience, you know, juxtaposed with the comedy. And then as soon as Lane enters, the kind of sun shines, and there's little moments of like that you couldn't create with lighting, not our budget, you know. Even, you know, the lighting team did a great job, but they were like, this is amazing, bro, like we're using this. And so in some ways it played in our favor, because it actually gave it a tone and a feel that we just wouldn't have been able to create without budget. So while it was really hard for the crew and the cast, everyone was cold, there's nothing worse than shooting in the rain and the wind. Actually, from my perspective, when I was watching the rushes, I was like, this is great, you know. So and then we started up again, and then we got bumped for COVID when we had just started on our final episode 5. It was our first day in that location, and we were there for 3 days, and we'd set dressed and everything. We had to pull everyone out, and then we had to go and load back in. So there's, you know, we're 2 years in now, so the reality of shooting in COVID is very real for every single producer and creator. But then it was like,
the Wild West.
Yeah, it's Wild West. But what I would say is, you know, again, we were so privileged to have our 3 leads, and Roseanne, she knew the material so well that it was easy to then kind of pick the pieces up, and our cast knew the material so well because they'd been there for so long that we were able to kind of just go back in. And there's a few little things that little Easter eggs for people if they really watch hard, but you'll never know, and the secrets are with us.
Yeah, excellent. I want to talk about your experience shooting this, Ali. How much rehearsal did you have, and what level of preparation did you have by the time you got to set? Because how long was the shoot all up? Like, had it gone according to plan without these pauses and whatnot, how long did you schedule the series for?
I think we shot for a few weeks.
Okay.
It was, quite fast turnaround.
Can you talk about the preparation you did in anticipation of that shoot?
Yeah, I think because we were, as creators, we were there all the way through development. Yeah, I knew Alex like the back of my hand, and the rehearsals were mainly with the other supporting cast like Jay Ryan, Tandy Wright, Kim Crossman, getting that chemistry right. And so we did do a few rehearsals, but Roseanne's not the type of director to overcook. So you work out the intentions of the scene, the blocking, and then because it's, you know, the series, there's big emotions, there's big drama. If you overcook it, it's tiring on us, it's tiring on, you know, the crew. So we knew basically the rehearsals allowed us to know our intentions very well, and then it's just like lighting it on fire when it's time to shoot.
Excellent.
And your stunt rehearsals.
Oh yeah, stunt rehearsals. Oh my God.
Oh,
we had Tim Wan, who was amazing. He like worked on Mad Max Fury Road. I bruised really easily. I was like covered in bruises by the end of this, finishing this series. Not because I was hurt or anything, because Tim Wan's amazing. Like, if you just grab me, I'll bruise. But that was so fun, like being able to do something physical like that. And hopefully we'll get to do more if season 2 comes around.
Excellent. Fingers crossed for that. We talked about the challenging kind of aspects of production, but I wonder if both of you could talk to us about some of the favorite things that scenes, say, or moments when you shot, things that made you really kind of happy to know that, yep, we got that in, or possibly like when you watch a movie. So when you were shooting, what was your favorite moment while you were shooting? Starting with you, Ali.
Oh, my favorite moment. I think just being so in that world. I mean, the whole reason I got into acting is because I watched Lord of the Rings when I was 11. It was just like, I need to be part of this. You know how, of course, it's not real life. The only way you can do it is to be in the movie industry. So yeah. I think just being feeling it, you know, credit to the production design, costume, makeup, just feeling so in the world that this is real. Yeah, the fantasy of it really made me really happy, and the catharsis of it, you know, or the things we touch on are real life issues, the family dramas, you know, the regrets, the grief, the sadness. It's all real world stuff, and I think yeah, that made me really happy to do it with people that I really rate, and that trust in everyone, like that we're making a show that's, I don't know, I just had a feeling that was going to be like, I would really enjoy watching it. So
and we enjoy watching it. What about you, Bronywnn? Like, were there moments that you were like, yes, you know, this is a joy to be doing this at this moment?
I think for me, I think the when I started seeing the rushes from the house come through, and the time that I spent on set when we were at the main location, where the dairy farm is, that was when I was kind of like, had this moment, because there's some really emotional scenes there, and there's some really funny scenes, like the scene with Kim Crosman and JJ is so funny when she's walking around the house, and you know, they're talking about the cows, and Ellie's in the shed kind of watching Jay Ryan. Like, it's just it was kind of that for me, it was the reality of it. And then I just remember a crew member kind of saying, oh, this is going to be a good show. And it was because it was that's where we started. And it was kind of that at that point you were like, yeah, this is gonna, because we had a small crew. What we were doing, we had the ambition of a full drama, but we didn't have the budget of a full drama. But you know, your team around you, they know if they're making a good show or not, you know, and you could tell because everybody worked. Oh, sorry, that's my dog. Everyone worked so hard and put in, you know, so many extra hours and everything like that, and you could just tell. So there's every single moment, even on the hard days. The Mirror Maze was such a hard day for crew and cast.
But what an achievement, though. Can you talk to us about that sequence?
People were getting seasick, weren't you, Ellie?
Yeah, we have to like have ropes on the floor because we can't work out where the exit is. Yeah.
So it wasn't just stellar acting. You were literally kind of doing.
Oh yeah, literally.
That, you know, that day, and that's what I mean. Like, so every single day had its challenges, but everyone believed in what we're doing, and I think that's the joy of making television in this market. Is it's so hard, and there's never enough money, and there's never enough time, that you have to surround yourself with people that really believe in your vision, and that's what we tried to do. You know, when we got our team members on board, and everyone did such an amazing job.
Absolutely. Let's go back a little bit. You talked about the market, and that brings into the conversation the platform that supported you, TVNZ. And some might describe this whole proposition as, again, you know, bold, shall we say? And it comes with this huge ambition, this huge vision, and it is world building. The series is world building. I want to go way back. How did you pitch this to TVNZ, and how did you get it to the point where they were like, you know what? Yeah, let's do it. Can you talk about that? I'll start with Ellie.
Sure. The early days, I think before we met with Bronywnn, was we pitched it to Kim Harrop, who was at that time a commissioner at TVNZ, and you know, she created Fresh Eggs, which was also very risky, bold, And I think Kim was there to do some stuff. So she really, took a shine to our idea and really went into bat for us during like pitch meetings and stuff. So so a lot of this industry is luck, who you meet, right time, and after Kim, we had Steve Barr, and credit to him being from a writing background, really understood what we were trying to achieve, and he also understand his, the TVNZ mandate to be a commercial broadcaster and stuff like that. So TVNZ really, I think, stuck their neck out with this show, and I hope it paid off for them.
Steve was such a huge supporter of it. He loved, and I think as a commissioner, I think he really enjoyed the creative process, and because he is a writer, we invited him to writers' rooms, and he was at table reads, and he was such a huge part of the production, and he was so passionate about it that he just went into bat. And Navak was a huge supporter. I just think we had a really strong, TVNZ want noisy content, like that's, they don't want people turning on Netflix. They want people staying on TVNZ, so they really kind of empowered us and trusted us to deliver on what we pitched, and we did. And they gave us some flexibility with, some of the episodes are slightly longer than a commercial half hour. Our time slot, they made sure that they knew where they were confident in what they were doing with us, and they weren't trying to make our show. They knew what it was going to do for TVNZ. They weren't trying to make it something else, They weren't kind of go, okay, well, now we need something at this time slot, so you need to change. They never did that to us. They were so supportive and understanding, and were just there along the way with us and trusted us. So we can't speak highly enough of that relationship, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. And so you're shooting, you got this bold and risky project to TVNZ. And it's the biggest thing that FLAT3 has done. And this is your first time working, Kevin & Co. is working with FLAT3. What are the lessons that you took away from making Creamery like this? Can you think about something that you realized perhaps in your own practice, or about what is possible, or maybe something that maybe you would do differently? Can you think of the biggest lesson that you learned while making Creamery? I think I'll start with you again, Bronywnn.
I watch it and I actually am like, we made that. like there's some parts of me that's like, oh my God, we made that. And now writing season 2, I'm like, are we gonna make this? We're gonna make this. So I think the biggest you always want more money, you always want more shoot time, you always, no matter, and I had the benefit of having Tony Ayres mentor me basically through the process, and he was working on clickbait at the time, and he was like, look, Bron, I still, we only just had enough money for that. So it was a really kind of grounding experience in terms of like, you just have to set your expectation and your goals, and you just have to kind of always think big, always dream big, always be ambitious, and then you find your way of how to tell that story with what you have. And ultimately we're storytellers. So it just reminded me of like, surround yourself with good people, and no matter how hard the journey is along the way, it always will become something that you're really proud of and that you want to continue doing. It was just reminding yourself what a privileged position we're in to be able to make something so ambitious. But always want more money.
Excellent. Ellie, what about you? What's a lesson that you learned in the process of delivering season 1 of Creamery?
Biggest lesson for me, maybe it's actually as an actor. I have the easiest job on set. Honestly, when I hear stories about actors behaving badly, I'm like, dude, all you need to do is just doing your lines, show up on time, be nice to the crew, be nice to your makeup artists, because being behind the scenes and knowing how much effort, how much money, how much time it takes to make a show, and you being the face of it is like the linchpin in a sense. And I think that really taught me a humbling lesson about just the team effort it takes to make a show. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you. And so this thing is now done. It's screened here. It's gotten some terrific reviews from the local press, but also the international press. Sydney Morning Herald gave you guys a rave. So did, obviously Renews, Guy Somerset, as we know. You found an audience overseas. Let's talk about the fact that Creamery has reached territories like Australia and also received distribution via Hulu, which is fantastic in the United States. Can you tell us, was that always the ambition? We want a global kind of distribution of this? I imagine so, but can you tell us about the process of how you got into those markets and what is the reality of creating something that can reach those markets?
So we were, as Ellie kind of mentioned very early on in this chat, the premise sells the show. Like every single person we talked to was like, okay, yeah, great, done, sign me up, kind of thing. And as I've mentioned, Carthew introduced myself to Roseanne and the team, but he also introduced me. Roseanne had met Tony, but he also just introduced me to Tony. And then with Tony came the CFO, or he's now the chief operating officer at Matchbox, Matt. He is a genius. He is amazing, and he basically helped us get more money for the project, and he helped us get the distribution deal with NBCU, which led it to being on Hulu. So without Matt and Tony's support, we wouldn't be in the position. And Matt's kind of said to me numerous times, he's like, yeah, but it's the content that's good, Bron. It's doing its job. But it's like all those conversations, all those hours, me calling, being like, we need more money, Matt. Like, come on, help me out, So it was a desire that we always wanted to sell to a streamer. That was, something that we talked about with TVNZ really early on. That was kind of the motivation. But there was also a real motivation to try and raise more finance. As a pre-sale. So we went down that track and we fought hard for that, and we gambled. We spent some of that money before we got the pre-sale, and we hoped for the best, and we all kind of collectively went, we're doing this. And so that's kind of where it came from. And we was just so, again, as Ellie said, you just have to believe and think big, and don't underestimate yourself.
Excellent. And you and your response, Ellie, to hitting new audiences and new markets with a wider distribution, how do you feel that something that you've created has gained foothold in these territories?
I think people just like to hear the New Zealand accent coming out of Asian faces, It's like hearing an Asian face doing a Southern accent. It's just not something you expect probably in the US market. And our humor is very different. It's so deadpan and dry sometimes that I think it's refreshing for an international audience to watch. Obviously, they had the Flight of the Conchords and stuff like that, but yeah, to do it from a sci-fi perspective, I think I always knew it would like tap into the international market. I think it had the scale of it, the sheer high concept nature of this show, I think always had international appeal. So I'm really glad that people responded.
And that's something, sorry, I was going to add to that, something that New Zealand On Air was so supportive, and part of their job is to develop and grow good New Zealand content and tell New Zealand stories. And they were so excited about this, and they backed us from day one, and Amy and her team were really like, this is something quite special and you need to push it as hard as you can. So we had huge amount of support to enable us to take that next step, which, we were surrounded by great people telling us, come on guys, you can do this. And we did. So that's great,
Yes, yeah.
Excellent. We have a few minutes left of this session. We have about 14 minutes from now. So at this point, we want to invite our audience to pose some questions. Some have already come through. And so we're going to be going through some of them, which have come through right now. For instance, this one is regarding emerging practitioners. When emerging practitioners are pitching an ambitious project, they get told often it isn't achievable. You guys obviously ignored such feedback. What advice would you give emerging teams with ambitious ideas? I think we're at a space now where more and more people, perhaps likely inspired by what you were able to do, they too want to create a creamery. What advice would you give them in a world where headwinds exist and they might get knocked back a bit?
Well, I'll tell you, for us, the idea is quite bizarre. So what we initially did is we applied for the New Zealand On Air Diversity Development Fund. And thank God for that initiative. And I know, like, conservatives are like, diversity, but if it wasn't for that fund, we wouldn't have had the resources to make that first stage of development. So if you've got an idea that you're really passionate about, apply for these funds, the seed grant from NZ Writers Guild. A lot of these funds don't come with strings attached, and I'm really grateful to our government that we have these initiatives, because most countries don't. So that's my advice. If you've got an idea, pitch it around to your normie friends. They love it. You've got gold, and apply for these things.
Because they are the audience in many
absolutely.
ways. They are the ones who will, eventually consume this, and if they love it. So that's really good. What about you, Bronywnn? What's your advice for people with ambitious projects and who get told maybe that's not achievable?
I think it's about having a confident team. So I think if you're emerging and you've got an ambitious idea, you need the support of a producer that's made television before or a film before. You have to be open to collaboration, because we have such limited funds in this market that it's a commercial decision at the end of the day, and there are risks, and so while commissioners and NZ On Air want to fund everything that they like, they have to look at what's going to get made, what's going to get delivered on time. There are commercial realities to it. So I think having a confident team, and that's what FLAT3 did. They kind of, they went to Carthew and were like, we want to make this. What do we do? How do we? And I think just use your peers. You don't be afraid to pick up the phone and ask a producer to give you some feedback. On top of what Ellie's saying, they were able to get that money to really develop it and then pitch it to a network. But just surround yourself with confident people that can help you get your show made.
Excellent. Sage advice. One question is something that we are all invested in. Will there be a season 2 of Creamery?
Will there?
Lobby hard for us.
Yeah.
Online, please.
Yeah.
So the work has begun. I mean, there are ambitions for that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's out of our hands at the moment. We've done what we can to pitch for it. It's just about raising that finance. It's about getting us to that. That's probably the biggest learning we had, is we won't do it for the same budget. We just can't. We called in as many favors as we could. A season 2 needs to step up. And so we've kind of drawn a line in the sand about what we think we can do it for. And now we just have to hope that we can get to that finance level.
This one is a question with a broader kind of view. I'm just going to read it out. There's been criticism from some drama producers that New Zealand On Air is spreading scripted funding too thinly across higher budget productions, lower budget series, and ones like Creamery that sit somewhere in the middle. What would be your response to this criticism? What opportunities or insights can you share about why this mid-tier funding is important for the sustainability of the sector? Is there an argument to be made there?
I think the mid-tier funding, I mean, that's where Kevin and Co plays. If I'm being really honest, all the shows I make sit around the Creamery, you know, if not, Creamery was actually one of the higher ones that we've been funded. And my argument to that is we need to learn. We need to grow. We need to have, comedy is also, you know, you need bigger writers' rooms, you need showrunners, you need, it has to be funny and dramatic, you know, you need everything that a drama needs. And I think they both exist. I was talking about it yesterday actually, and you know, the big dramas are so important to our market because what they do is they give a DOP a really long run of work. Like Marty, for example, he had amazing DOP. He had all this amazing experience working on all these wonderful SPP shows. And that's why he was able to come and do Creamery at a lower rate, because the bigger productions help support the mid-tier productions, you know, and that's the ecosystem. Like that's the ecosystem. Like we need both to work, because then we can upskill as producers, we can upskill as creators, as actors. And there's also you can take more risks at that $2 million mark than you can at the $10 million mark, you know, with cast, with how you tell a story, with who you have in your team. And I think, yeah, like we need a training ground, and those mid-tier shows give us that.
Okay, thank you very much. We have another question here. Do you think that pitching a more comedic series is more difficult to New Zealand executives? Do you think there's more resistance to accept comedy, especially with higher budget expectations, or more higher concepts? That is the question. Either one of you. Is pitching a comedic series more difficult? Have you found that to be the case?
I don't think so. I feel like what sells these days are comedies and true crime dramas.
We certainly have a lot of those.
Yeah. I think comedy, because the definition of comedy has expanded so much that it can encompass so much taste, like a broad range of taste, a broad range of structures. No, I don't think it's more difficult. I think I think what's difficult is to do comedy well. Dramas, you can kind of wing it with a really beautiful shot. No disrespect to, you know, dramas, but yeah, comedy, to do it well, that's a tough ship to steer. Yeah.
I think there's a perhaps a misconception that less comedy gets funded because of what Ali just said. Like comedy, perhaps it's either hit or miss, right? Like some people like it, some people don't. So maybe there's a little bit of risk there, but I think it's just as hard to get a drama made as it is to get a comedy made, as it is to get a factual show made. I mean, Kevin and Co and FLAT3, we obviously specialize in comedy, so that's in our wheelhouse. We know that. So I haven't pitched a big drama, so I don't really know. But I just think getting anything across the line, it comes down to your idea.
Yeah. What's interesting, of course, is that Creamery kind of flirts with different genres, right? And ostensibly it's a comedy, it's a high concept comedy, but it's also sci-fi. There's action, there's real huge pathos and drama there. Can you talk about, let's go back a little bit, like how did you conceive it? Did it end up that way, or did you say, you know what, we're going to do a genre mix and hopefully you know, find its feet in the writing? Or was that always the case, that it was going to be this genre mix?
Yeah. Our reference shows are like Barry, Atlanta, so you can imagine that's like, I think we like the Roseanne's quote is salted caramel. It's that sweet and salty. This is what we are. You know, you have the funny with the really heartbreaking stuff, and I think that whiplash effect, it makes you feel funny. Well, at least it makes me feel funny in my tummy. So that's what you want.
And Roseanne is she's a genius. Like the tightrope between whiplash. You can't whiplash your audience so much that they like, whoa. It just has to, as Ellie said, make you feel something that you're like, oh, I don't quite know how to, you know. And Roseanne, that's why she's so good at that. And it was by design, you know.
Excellent. Talking about producers and picking up projects like that, we have a question here from someone who is considers themselves new. Are there experienced producers like you, or who are open to working with new writers in New Zealand? Or maybe a different way to ask this question is, how can a new writer in New Zealand catch your eye, and what would make you work with a completely new writer? Over to you, Bronywnn.
Oh yeah, I think it's about again, it's about your you know what you've got to share, what you've written on spec, what idea you might have, trying to get on a writer's table, being a note taker. That's an amazing way. We had an amazing note taker on a show I'm developing at the moment. And
can you tell us what a note taker is? Can you elaborate on that a little bit for those here?
I always have a note taker in the room, and I try and use somebody who's either a new writer or wants to be a producer, and they sit in a writer's room for 5 days, and they take notes from basically the session. So they get to be there when you beat sheet, they get to be there when you create full brainstorms, they get to be there when you do the characters, and they're typing it all up for you for producers to note. And you're a sponge. You get to be in the process. You get to be with these amazingly talented people. And I'm a huge advocate for them. We don't often have budgets that allow us to have note takers, but I'm trying at Kevin & Co. It's something we're really trying, because it's a way to upskill new writers. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. Rapid fire questions now, because we are running out of time. Both of you have had successfully received funding for your projects, but what are some common mistakes when putting together and pitching an idea to others?
Too long. Too long. Honestly, like the more economical you can write, the better. And it's actually very hard to write economically.
100%.
Producers are busy. They, as much as they love, and commissioners are busy. So yeah, it has to be short and sweet, and it has to be hooky and catch your attention.
Cool. Thank you.
And those are the lessons we do. We lead by too.
Yeah, a lot of questions here are about the shoot length in terms of weeks and days. How many days were spent shooting each episode? Does it vary per episode? And is there a ballpark figure of like, how long did it take you to shoot the entire series, COVID break notwithstanding, which I think we touched on earlier? So how many days were spent shooting each episode? Let's start with that one.
It was varied, because we shot out the house, we shot out different locations because we couldn't afford to return, like lots of and we had one director, which meant that we could go all over the place with our episodes. So it's quite hard. It was probably about 4 days an episode on average, but it was about a 7-week shoot in the end with 2 or 3 pickups, which is, for a half hour, that is decent. But it was still not enough time because we had so many stunts and action scenes to get through.
And one last question here. I think this one is definitely for Ali. Hey, Ali, do you think your FLAT3 character would survive in a Creamery world?
I think she would. You could see her turning dark towards the end of the series. Yeah,
absolutely. Okay, we've reached the end of our session. It leaves me to thank both Ali and Bronywnn for their insights, for their time and generosity in sharing the creative process. I've certainly learned a lot, and I hope that goes the same for everyone watching this webinar. I'd like to thank Eloise and Veronica from Script to Screen for organizing this wonderful webinar for all of us. And thank you to everyone here for attending. That's all the time we have. Ka kite ano. Pumarie.